All right, tea spillers, buckle up today. We're diving into one of the darkest, most infamous cult stories in history. This is the story of the People's Temple, its charismatic yet terrifying leader Jim Jones, and the tragedy that ended in the jungles of Guyana, where over 900 people lost their lives in what became known as Jonestown. Let's start at the beginning. Jim Jones was born in Indiana in the early 1930s, and from the jump, people described him as a little different. Obsessed with religion and death, young Jim would hold mock funerals for animals, preaching over them as if he was some kind of child pastor. Creepy foreshadowing? Yeah, I think so. As he grew up, Jones became fascinated with power and control. He saw how religion gave leaders influence over people, and he wanted in on that. By his 20s, he was preaching in Indianapolis, blending fiery Christian sermons with radical social justice ideas. And honestly, that was part of the appeal. He was one of the few white preachers at the time calling for racial integration. He brought black and white congregants together under one roof, something that made him stand out in the 50s. In 1955, Jim founded the People's Temple. At first, it looked like a progressive church, feeding the poor, healing the sick, welcoming everyone regardless of race. People loved it. But behind the scenes, Jones was already testing how far he could push his followers. He'd fake miracles, stage healings, and slowly convince his congregation that he had supernatural powers. By the 1970s, the People's Temple had thousands of members and had relocated to California. Politicians courted Jones because he could mobilize huge groups of voters. Celebrities visited his services, but those who got too close saw the cracks. Jones demanded total loyalty. He kept followers exhausted with endless meetings, and he controlled every aspect of their lives, money, relationships, even who they could talk to. It was less church, more dictatorship. When the press started sniffing around about abuse, violence, and shady finances, Jones came up with a plan. He told his flock they'd build a utopian community in the jungles of Guyana, South America. He called it Jonestown. At first, it was sold as paradise lush gardens, children playing, a community living in peace and equality. But reality? It was hot, swampy, and brutal. Members worked long days in the fields with barely enough food, while Jones sat in his cabin with imported wine and drugs. Loudspeakers blasted his voice across the settlement day and night. Armed guards kept watch. And passports? Yeah, those were confiscated. Basically, Jonestown became an open-air prison. By 1978, families back in the States were worried. Some had received desperate letters from their loved ones, others said they hadn't heard a word. That's when U.S. Congressman Leo Ryan decided to investigate. He flew down with a small delegation of journalists and relatives. At first, Jones tried to keep up appearances, music, dancing, happy children, the works. But then, cracks showed. A few brave members slipped, Ryan notes, begging for help to escape. When Ryan agreed to take them, things spiraled fast. At the Port Kaituma airstrip, as Ryan and his group prepared to leave, People's Temple gunmen opened fire. Ryan was killed, along with 3 journalists and a defector. Back at Jonestown, Jones gathered everyone. He told them the congressman's murder meant the U.S. military would come storming in. He framed it as a choice: live and suffer or die with dignity. What followed is beyond chilling. Huge vats of flavor aid, laced with cyanide and tranquilizers, were prepared. Parents gave it to their children first. Witnesses described mothers sobbing as they forced poison into their babies' mouths. Adults followed, lining up, drinking, collapsing. Some resisted, but armed guards stood by to make sure nobody ran. When it was all over, more than 900 people were dead men, women, and children. Jones himself was found with a bullet wound to the head. Whether it was suicide or one of his guards pulling the trigger, no one knows for sure. But his reign ended there, in Jonestown. The Jonestown Massacre was the largest loss of American civilian life, in a deliberate act until September 11th. Images of the bodies sprawled across the jungle shocked the world, and the word cult? It became forever tied to that one event. To this day, Jonestown is a grim reminder of how charisma, manipulation, and fear can lead ordinary people into extraordinary tragedy. So that's story 1 of our cult series, The Tragic Rise and Fall of Jim Jones in Jonestown. Next time, we'll dive into another infamous case that left its own scar in history. Until then, sip carefully, tea spillers, because not every cup is safe to drink.